Hi there, everybody. This is David, and I'm not wearing any pants. Well, I normally actually don't whenever I record. But anyway, oh my gosh, y'all, I saw this over on Twitter. I am looking at Square Enix's financial reports for last year, as well as questions and answers, and there's a lot of good stuff here. I was just kind of like briefly going over it just by myself, and I was looking at it. I was like, oh, this is kind of boring. And then I saw something about Dragon Quest, some stuff about Final Fantasy, some stuff about Dragon Quest X, Dragon Quest Adventures of Dai, some stuff about Star Ocean 2. There's some good stuff in here. This is mostly really good news. And there's 12 pages of stuff here, and there's a lot. So I'm not going to be going over all of it. A lot of it's really dry. I'm just going to be going over all the high points, the good stuff that I want to talk about. Starting here with this digital entertainment portion right here. It says that net sales in HD games, that's console games, rose thanks to Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy Pixel Remastered. So yeah, they're looking at these remastered games and they're saying, hey, that is making money. That is good news right there. It says the MMO subsegment had strong sales over the past 2 years, mostly because of the pandemic, and then that strong momentum persisted following the release of Endwalker. However, it has been since declining. Net sales for games in the smart devices has marked a 3-year low, so it looks like they might not be focusing too much on mobile gaming any longer. It does say that they released new titles such as Dragon Quest Champions and Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis, but all that was unable to offset the weakness of the existing titles. So yeah, it looks like they are not going to be focusing on that stuff much longer, or at least they're going to be pivoting into things that will make them money, such as HD titles, console titles. It says here, in Q1, the HD sub-segment released Final Fantasy Pixel Remastered and Final Fantasy 16, followed in Q2 by Infinity Strash, Dragon Quest The Adventures of Dai. More titles are forthcoming. The response to our recent release, Star Ocean: The Second Story R, has been very positive. Ho-ho! We intend to further grow our sales forward with the releases of Dragon Quest Monsters of the Dark Prince and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So, this is great. Not only was Pixel Remastered a moneymaker for them, but Star Ocean: The Second Story R has been a moneymaker for them. So, it looks like we are getting more remasters coming. Maybe we'll get that Chrono Trigger, maybe we'll get that Xenogears, maybe we'll get Bahamut Lagoon or Treasure of the Rudras. Who knows? Oh my gosh, this is just fantastic. They then go into this whole discussion of the MMO sub-segment. They talk about Dawn Trail, all that kind of stuff, but who cares? Because, ho-ho! As with Final Fantasy XIV, we are readying a variety of initiatives for Dragon Quest X Online that we look forward to announcing. I wonder what those initiatives could be. I wonder where there might be a huge untapped market for Dragon Quest X. Huh! I wonder! Oh my gosh! I wonder if we're getting Dragon Quest X! I personally would like the offline version just because I simply don't play MMOs. And the offline version would be playable on a console, and that's just how I prefer to do things. So, oh my gosh, that would just be fan-fricking-tastic. It goes on to talk about Dragon Quest Champions, which is that mobile game. It says that it delivered a solid performance immediately after its launch, but then it started to weaken. However, they are going to be putting something out for its 6-month anniversary. But they are satisfied, however, with how Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis has performed in September and October, immediately following its launch. And then they do plan to do tie-ins with the launch of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth to kind of like, put them both together and things like that. So that is very interesting right there. Then it goes on, let's see, there's just some other stuff right here. Yeah, this is about 16 of Pixel Remastered. This down here, this publication thing I thought was interesting. It says, while the publication segment's net sales have been held mostly flat over the past 3 years, its operating income has declined slightly as the cost of goods sold have risen due to the weak yen and inflation in prices of raw materials and other imports. However, through the year, the popularity of the Isekai Tensei genre of portal fantasy, which involves characters being reincarnated into another world, meant that the genre accounted for a substantial portion of her content. I can't think of any games like this. I don't know. However, the popularity of that genre eventually subsided, and we've subsequently succeeded at creating a steady stream of hits in a variety of genres, thus enabling this publication's solid performance. It then goes on to talk about merchandising, little doodads and knickknacks and anime statuettes and stuff like that I don't really care about. And then over here on this page, it says, lastly, regarding our communication with investors and shareholders, I would like to create a cycle whereby we engage in more open, they're not being secretive anymore, more open communication through which we solicit feedback from you and then we reference to inform our business initiatives. I note that, in keeping with this thinking, we have run today's financial results briefing session differently than previous ones, and reflecting the numerous requests that we've received for providing a simultaneous rather than constructive interpretation, as well as providing quantitative information on our business rather than short-term numbers. So, what that means is that they are going to be going ahead and they are going to be more transparent, more open in the future, and then they hold a question and answer session, which they normally never do. So there's actually some decent questions down in here in this question and answer section. They talk about the profit contribution of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and they pretty much say, hey, if this game fails, we're screwed, people. They say, everything rides on the popularity and the sales of Rebirth. They've put so much into it. They say, if we can't do much with this, then we are completely screwed right there. They also go on to say that they do expect to release a PC version of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth whenever that would make the most financial sense for them. So if you don't have a PS5, do look forward to being able to play this on the PC, at least. Then it goes here and it talks about, it says, do you consider the broad strokes of your next medium-term business plan? What do you think that you currently lack but will need to in order to achieve sustained growth? To fill in such gaps, would you potentially consider investments or other inorganic investments? So they talk about 2 points that they find to be lacking. One is the limited diversity of the titles of their portfolio. It says, because we possess strong IPs like the Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy franchises, I believe that we've tended to be overly reliant on certain gameplay styles or genres. This is a little bit worrisome to me. Let me just finish reading it and then I'll tell you why. Meanwhile, the tastes of consumers in the gaming market have diversified, and customers have come to enjoy content for a variety of genres. Moreover, blockbuster titles are not the only ones that enjoy popularity. For example, our title Power Wash Simulator is somewhat of an outlier in our portfolio, and that's the game that's well suited for casual play, but we've been able to steadily build up our earnings from it. For these reasons, I want to increase our development proficiency by strengthening our internal development capabilities so that we'll be able to achieve greater diversity in our title portfolio. I would also not rule out inorganic means as an option for strengthening internal development capabilities. So what he's saying here is because Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest have been so strong, they've only been focusing on RPGs in the past. But then he's like, hey, we had this weird one outlier of Power Wash Simulator, so therefore, screw everything else! Let's go all in on Power Wash and all in on casual! So that's just worrisome to me. They're still going to be doing RPGs, obviously, but, to me, you have an outlier. You have something strange that happened, so why go all in on trying to recreate that strange thing that happened? You know what I'm saying? If you have strong IPs and you have known game titles that will sell, shouldn't you focus on those rather than, a maybe kind of sort of Power Wash Simulator? It just seems odd. And then they talk about different genres and stuff. So that to me means okay, well, we're branching away from RPGs. Maybe we're branching into first-person shooters or racing games or fighting games or something like that rather than what works. So that to me is somewhat worrisome, I've got to say. This question. Has the way that your development function have spread to cover so many bases made controlling your development efforts more difficult? It has less to do with our development function and more to do with the numerous entries in our lineup. I want to structure our development function so that we're able to ensure higher quality from each title by slimming down our lineup. So I think what this actually has to do is with what happened back in 2022. When all those games came out within 2 months of each other. Dragon Quest Treasures, Tactics Ogre Reborn, Harvestella, Valkyrie Elysium. It was like this never-ending deluge of games, one after another, and people were just kind of overwhelmed by it, and maybe you bought like one of them just to like check it out or whatever. None of them were like amazing or anything, but most of them were good enough. Oh, Davidvinc Chronicle, that was another one too. Like there was a lot of them. My favorite of the whole bunch was probably Harvestella. But you know, they were decent, but they weren't like blockbuster groundbreaking. So I think that that's what they're talking about here is like saying like maybe instead of releasing 6 games that are kind of like we should release one game that's like whoa. I really think that that is what they are trying to say right there. Why have you been unable to slim down your lineup until now? As our customers' needs and the types of devices available have diversified, they're talking about mobile here, we've tried to produce hits by developing a wide variety of titles rather than focusing only on certain ones. I believe that this has resulted in the splintering of our resource pool, again going back to what I was just talking about. Meanwhile, there have been clear winners and losers among the major titles released recently in the gaming market, and it's become possible for even indie titles to make their presence felt. Looks like they're finally noticing Sea of Stars and Chained Echoes and games like that. The market is increasingly polarized between blockbuster and indie titles, but I feel that we've developed many titles that fell somewhere in the middle. Again, those 2022 games. I want to make clearer distinctions going forward. So maybe they're saying, you know, if we were going to release those 2022 games again, they would have even less of a budget and they would be more indie, or they would have much more of a budget, there'd be less of them, and they'd be more towards like the AA or AAA or something like that. So, like, that's just kind of an interesting thing right here. And then the last question I want to go over. My impression is the market's reaction to Infinity Strash Dragon Quest The Adventure of Dai has been harsh. What is your take on it internally? Wow, I can't believe that Square is going to answer this question. You mentioned that you intend to transition from a product-oriented approach to a market-oriented approach. Can we expect better quality to result from narrowing the gap between what the market and your customers expect versus what you are delivering? Answer. We have received harsh feedback from customers on Infinity Strash Dragon Quest The Adventures of Dai, and we also acknowledge that problems exist. I personally enjoyed it, but whatever. We think that the time that elapsed between the anime's broadcast and the game's release, as well as the gap between what customers expected for the content versus the game elements that we focused on as the title's selling points, also contributed to the feedback that we received. I think what they're talking about here is how it was marketed as an action RPG, and yeah, it did have action RPG portions, but it felt like it was 70%, hey, watch this cutscene, and then 30%, hey, go out and fight. So, you know, they just need to be more transparent in what to expect in order to not get that backlash. It also says that we've begun to reflect feedback from customers that have played titles ahead of their releases into the development process, and they're also working to put mechanisms in place that allow us to incorporate customer feedback on HD games in the initial stages of development. How nice would that be if, say, somebody was sent an early copy of a game and then somebody could be like, hey, this portion sucks, go back and change it. Kind of like I did with Atlas Wept just the other day. And the developer, to their credit, they responded with grace and poise, and I loved it. And they were like, hey, David, thank you so much for a review. I know it was harsh, but we accept your feedback, and guess what? We're going to change our game for the better. So hopefully now Square is learning, and they will be able to change things for the better as well. So there is a lot here, and if you do want to read it, I do have a link to it over on my Twitter page as well. And yeah, there's a lot here. They are recognizing their faults. They are trying to diversify their portfolio. They are happy with the performance of games like the Pix Remasters, Final Fantasy 16, as well as Star Ocean: The Second Story. So do expect more remasters coming out. So I want to know what y'all think about this, because this is pretty crazy to me. And for the most part, I think it's all really good news. Let me know in the comments, and have a good day.